Can I have your attention? So this is our faculty forum, and the point of this is, I don't know what, well, the first point is I don't know why there's this big distance. It just makes it harder to communicate. If you want to move down, that would be great. It's not, we're not going to test you, and we're not going to touch you, and you're really, really safe in here. Yeah, and the camera moving forward. Yeah, be ready to come down here. Good. I know this is a little difficult. Okay, so this little class is designed to address your concerns, your questions, your fears, your hopes, your dreams, your anxiety, anything you want to know within reason about us. So does anybody have a question, or does anybody want to start the ball rolling? No. Okay, so having heard a number of you play, I know everybody plays super well this year, I think I'll start by asking the faculty, as I always, that's sort of like the default to get the ball rolling. So I guess Arthur, since you're sitting next to me, I'll happily ask you, and then everybody can give an answer. With all these good performances, and people play their pieces quite solidly, technically, I think on a really high level. What do they do next? My question is, do you have any way that you teach people at this level to add their own voice, their own imagination, without showing them what you do in your imagination? I mean, is there a way that you have to teach them to open their own windows and create their own process, which is sort of personally what I feel most of these people, these wonderful pianists, you guys need.
I can't stop myself from sharing my interpretation of a lot of pieces because, I love these pieces and that's how it goes for me. But I definitely don't want to do it in a way that, that's the only way, because obviously it's not. And I'm a fan of early recordings of piano music from the early 20th century, 1930s or so, 40s, and because I find them much more inspiring, even though there are always problems with them. They play wrong notes, or a lot of pianists, great pianists do horrible interpretations sometime, and great ones other times, but they're alive. And so they're all different from each other. So back then, if you listen to a Chopin B minor sonata by one or by another one, it sounds like a different piece. And now, it's so similar between each one. Oh, the competition winners here is slightly different. One of them has a little bit better this or that. So my feeling is that there obviously should be a lot of ways of playing it, and I have my way, and sometimes it's helpful. I mean, sometimes I copy old recordings too. If there's a piece that's really beautiful, I see if I can play it like that, and I learn from that, and I never end up actually playing it like that. First of all, usually I can if I try to copy a great pianist, but it adds to your understanding of the music to really try to see what someone else is doing with it. And but I think the main thing to think about is your connection with the particular piece, because it's like two living things. It's you and the music, and you kind of have to come to an agreement of what it is that you're both doing together. And so the music is different for every piece, and you're different from every other person. I mean, you're a unique person in the universe, and so that relationship, if you really try and think about it, it brings out your own personality, rather than trying to say, oh, I'm going to try to do this to be, my personality. That's not good. You develop the personality naturally from inspiration from the music, and yeah. That's my
great.
advice.
Who would like to, any follow-up to that? You know, I just wanted to add that just by luck, anybody would want. When I was teaching at the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music, Steinway called me up to see a piano. And so it was close to where I was teaching. I said, of course I will go. I went to see the piano. To make a long story short, it turned out to be a concert ground, and it was being this widow of, I can't remember her husband's name, wanted to sell it. It wasn't really in workable condition, so I called Steinway and we looked up the number, and it just happened to be a C and A piano that Rachmaninoff recorded a lot of stuff on. So I said to myself, And so I called the guy that did the building for me at that time, A&C Pianograph, and he said, buy it. I said, how much should I offer? He said, go in there with $2,000 cash, that'll buy it, because the piano doesn't work. I said, well, you know, one of the legs is, doesn't matter, we got plenty legs. Get the piano, send it, ship it. So I went in with $2,000, gave the woman, she was delighted, moved it to New York, had it rebuilt, but I had it rebuilt like it would have been new for Rachmaninoff. And it was a 1917 piano, serial number like 117. It's not that, I mean, I didn't keep that piano forever because it's not really modern sound, and it didn't have accelerated action. There were things that, you know, it fell off on the top, like some of the pianos did that he recorded on. But then I listened to all the things that he recorded on the piano, and I sat down and I thought, I'm going to teach myself to do all this stuff, the sound, the coloration. And I was telling somebody today that I learned a lot about hand pedaling and how to do different sounds with the dampener. So it was a huge educational bonus, not to say that I ended up selling that piano for $64,000. Financial gain. So I mean, you know, there are all kinds of things you could do. And when you listen to old recordings, you listen to things that are no longer in style. I once spent an afternoon with Annie Fisher because she needed a place to practice, and my former teacher, George Shepard, suggested that she practice in my studio and fill it with smoke. No, your studio. So she started to play, and you know, she said, well, you know, do you ever trill like this? So she was talking about the 1, 3, 2, 3 trill. I mean, she did all these things that I've never seen in real life because she was so much older. So we spent about 2 hours, you know, showing me this outdated stuff that was just a way of using your body that made different. So it was extraordinarily interesting for me, even though it took me many days to get the cigarette smoke out. But, you know, so, you know, they're old videos, they're old recordings, it's a treasure chest.
Everything is there, everything's great.
So, you know, these are ideas of how you can, how do you open your own windows? How do you inspire yourself when you sit down? When you sit down and practice, you know, I would like all of you to go on an adventure. It doesn't have to be a great adventure. You know, the main thing is the adventure, the trip.
I don't want to hog all the time, but I have one last thing to say. For inspiration, I have a hobby of listening to old tenors on YouTube, singing opera arias, and I recommend that to you. That has inspired me so much. It's pulled the music out of me. For example, the greatest one, my favorite tenor, is Jussi Björling, a Swedish tenor, B-J-O-E-R-L-I-N-G, singing things like the aria from Tosca. It's just heart-rending, and it's so inspiring. And then you listen to that, and then on the other side of YouTube, you know, there are other ones similar to that, and you could just go on this exploration of all the great tenors. And the opera arias, they make you cry, really. You'll cry if you hear those things.
So just to go with that, with the opera idea, I think I'm in the same boat. It's extremely important for all of you guys to not just hear piano music, but to open your ears and hearts to not only different kinds of music, but different kinds of art, and to find out what moves you. Because when you get to know yourself emotionally, your own emotions, that's your vocabulary, right? Your vocabulary is not how fast you can play the scales. It's good when you can play them, and It's very impressive, but that's not, so a lot, I've heard this question throughout these last few days. Well, it's really hard for me, I'm focused on playing the right notes, and how do I add emotion to that? How do I add musicality to that? And the truth is that from the very beginning of your work on a piece of music, that should be active. Emotions should be activated, your imagination too, and listening to the old recordings, knowing operas, string quartets, symphonic music, etc., reading, thinking, and just meeting people, getting to know other people, other humans. Enriching your emotional vocabulary is what makes you kind of go in there and see what connects me to this piece of music. What is it trying to tell me? Because a human being wrote it. They're human, I'm human. What connects the two of us? And you have to do that from the start. So it's not enough to, okay, now I learned it, and now I'm going to sprinkle some emotion on top. It doesn't work like that. It has to happen organically. You have to build it like a building from a foundation.
I think too, you're also lucky in a way to have just immediate access to listening to whatever you want. It's in the palm of your hand on YouTube. So probably a lot of your process, you're thinking, how do I imitate those sounds or those timings? And I think you have to step away from it and rather say to yourself, what is the language of this music? Music is another language. So what is the story that it's telling? What am I conveying? What ideas? So I think when you're sitting down to practice, rather than thinking about this physicality or this oral exercise of imitation, you have to ask yourself, what is this about and what idea am I sharing with the listener? So a lot of time I'll say to students, before a phrase or before a section, ask yourself, what is your intention? What is it that you're trying to get across? And then we use sound and timing and silence to convey your ideas. A little more that way.
Anyone else?
I think asking questions all the time. And as you say, what is the point of this phrase? And then you decide some affect or some emotion that you understand about it. Then how do I use sound? How do I use timing to convey that? And then because everything has to be generated from, you have to generate it with a physical gesture. What is the physical gesture that goes along with making those sounds? And a lot of times I struggle with the phrase and I'm thinking, why isn't this going the way I want to go? And I realize that my body is actually going against what the musical idea is. And when you choreograph things, your arms, your bodies, everything about it, into the music, it creates not only sort of a musical sense of direction, but your physical aspect follows through. And then it all ties together. It seems to make sense. And then when you become physically comfortable with the phrase, then generally the music just sort of happens. But you have to have that thought in mind.
This goes, important point, this goes along with Dalcos is coming this weekend, and it's going to help you learn how to use your body as a tool of expression so that whatever you do at the piano will be with the music as opposed to against the music. And when I was a much younger teacher, just had given up ballet as a profession and went to piano, I didn't really know how to translate that so well, so I insisted that all my students take dance lessons. And it was an elimination for them, because it doesn't matter whether you're taking ballroom lessons or you're learning how to do the tango, yoga, and all of these total body movements are so important. As far as I'm concerned, you could do, like these swim teams that do ballet movements, all of that. Do something like that, because when you sit down at the piano and something doesn't feel right or it doesn't go right or whatever, you get stuck. Everybody gets stuck, whether you're composing a piece or you're performing a piece. You don't always have oh, this is great. So you have to learn how to unstick yourself, right? So I don't know if any of you do that, but that's a great tip.
I think to tag on to that, the more, what did you say? Sorry.
About dance.
Yeah, I think if you get stuck in the practicing aspect of it and in the physicality, that can actually tie yourself in knots mentally in a way. So by stepping outside of that, going for a walk, thinking about the music and so forth, I think that frees you from the physicality and allows the mind to kind of come up with all of these extra ideas that you can then go back to the keyboard and implement. I worked with Mitsuko Uchida on and off when I was living in London, and for every hour that she practiced, she would spend another hour on her futon looking at the score, trying to dig into other ideas. She'd go back to the piano and explore all those ideas, another hour on her futon, you know. And I think she said it was the hours on the futon that made her the musician and the curious musician that she likes to be. So I think that time away from the keyboard is equally important.
Do you guys have any questions? I see somebody has their mouth open. Okay.
I have a question. So I'm just curious, how do you guys choose a program as time goes by, as we move on, like
From year to year, from season to season, from semester to semester? Programs. Well, personally, unless I absolutely am getting a lot of money, I never play music I don't like. I mean, when I was doing competitions and there was a required piece, so there were some pieces I swallowed. There were also some pieces that I had to record. You know, it took a lot of work, and you recorded it, and then, well, that music is filed away somewhere, and that's the end of it. But I think it's really important to learn pieces you love. Right, and so it's like, it is a language, so if you don't like the sound of the language, then it's not a good idea. Just, you know, even though life is long, it's short, and we don't know how much time we have.
You know, it's a problem is that we know some of these pieces so well, like the G minor ballade. How many times did I hear that in my life? A lot.
Millions.
But the normal concert goer never hears it. Maybe, what, twice in their life, if they go to recitals or so. And so the thing is, you have to make a program, and supposedly you're not supposed to make programs that are too common, like play the G minor ballade, passionata, this kind of thing. But the audience is actually, whatever they say, but that they like those kind of pieces. But now there's a lot of pressure to come up with something new or something that nobody ever heard before, and it's problematic. So personally, I'm just moving back to playing pieces that I love.
I think for your age
Yeah, that's
range,
true.
you know, like for competitions
Yeah.
and stuff, I mean, you're doing that kind of thing, so you have to follow what the competitions say. I think it's good to play, you should have at least one or two pieces, you know, by a living composer. I think it's really important to play music of our time. And there's lots of wonderful living composers. A good place to start is whoever's, you know, at your school composing, whether it's a faculty member or a student. And that's why we're having the Dreamscape weekend. So I think if you get to know a composer, it's a whole new experience. I mean, a composer is just a person like us. You know, you'll really enjoy these people, and then hopefully it'll make you feel a little bit more relaxed about saying to a composer, I mean, you know, sometimes you have to say, I don't even know what you mean here. Can you clarify it? Either they'll play it or they'll explain it. They all speak English, the ones you will at contact, so you should be encouraged to do that.
But you know, it's extremely fresh. I mean, for when you play a program, for me personally, I think it's very important to have something that connects a program, something that, I don't know, presents some kind of journey, some kind of idea. I like to do that not because it's hip right now, but because I find it an interesting challenge. I find it just exciting. So for me personally, that's what I like to do. But I have to say, I would feel terrible without my Chopin, Beethoven, Schumann, etc. So I always want to be playing that music that you should all know. But at the same time, like for example, today somebody brought me a piece I'd never heard of by a composer from Hong Kong, and who lives between New York and Paris. And I was just delighted. It was so fascinating for me to get drawn into this new world and to draw connections to music that I do know. She happened to remind me of Schoenberg, whose music I love. And you know, it was fascinating. And you want that kind of response from people too. So I think it's important to play all kinds of music. It's important. It's like having a varied diet. You don't just want to eat pizza all day long, and you just don't want to have only salads. You want a variety of things, right? Same with music. So I think you need to try a lot of different kinds of music, and don't say, oh, I heard it once, right? This looks hard. I don't like it. You know, because you close yourself off to a world. So I would say be open-minded and be open-hearted.
And when you think, when you think of the amount of hours hours that it does take from sight reading a piece to polishing it, it's a big commitment. So it's definitely something that you should love to do, and there's so much piano repertoire that there's no reason why there's not something out there for you. As Professor Greene said, the more you love it and connect with it, the more it will be compelling to your listener. If you understand it and can't wait to convey it, the listener will attach to that experience as well.
Another question?
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like if you want to be a pianist, like you have to like, balance your life and your professional life, right? Like you have to like manage your time, like how much you put your practice time in, and also your normal life. So I'm just wondering, like if you have so many things to do at the same time, like besides your practice, so how can you like manage your time? Like because you have so many concerts to prepare and so many pieces to learn, and how can you like deal with this busy schedules and still can manage, like balance the.
You know, it's interesting that you say practice and then normal life. So I feel like practicing is part of my normal life.
That's what the other stuff is.
That's very true.
You know what? You don't play only new music, because sometimes you play, or programs that you played a lot, so they don't need so much time. There are periods that you go where you don't have concerts, so that's a good time to learn new music. There are periods in life that are more stressful with other things to do and less, things to do. So, the balance is always changing, and you always juggle it. I mean, my personal thing is, I always wake up really early in the morning, and if I'm going to practice, I always practice really early in the morning, because I have to do it before the email, before the phone, before all of this other, noise, traffic and everything else starts. So my day starts before anybody else's that I know, except my cat. She's always getting up very early too, because I get up. So, but some people practice at night, but it has to be kind of a quiet time. You can't be doing email and all of that. There has to be a space. I mean, the real issue is, we're so bombarded by everything with technology. You have to create some space in the time we have during the day to do important stuff.
But also I think the balance between your music life and your personal life is really important. Without going into detail, I mean, I'm a mom, I have 2 small kids, and in my personal experience, that's a really enriching experience that I've had, and it's amazing. And I feel like when you have more aspects to your life than piano, in a way that feeds into who you are as a musician, as an artist, it gives you, it's a challenge of balance, sure, and you have to be extremely meticulous in scheduling, but on the other hand, it makes your life bigger and just more wonderful, more wondrous, and more inspiring. So don't just be at the piano all the time, live.
And also, don't worry about that now. You will learn how to do it.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't predetermine what's around the corner.
Well, I think true, touches on a good thing, that the more life experiences you have as a human, just the bigger your music capacity will be, the more you'll be able to share, the more subtext of previous experience you have, you can kind of put into these interpretations. Otherwise, the well can run really dry, and that's when it sounds just like everybody else. So.
And ultimately, it's about sharing, I think. It's really about sharing. It's about moving even one person who comes to hear you. And if that's what we have, that's what our profession can offer that others might not have, is that we have this unique capability to touch, someone's soul, and that's big.
I think it's something to touch on with your age group too, because I do have an age 20 and 17-year-old daughter who, when you're growing up with these devices, we didn't have this. I mean, we had these long practice time, nothing really got in the way. But it must be so difficult, because you guys are really attached to these quick sound bites, so many fun things to check in on, not even daily, but hourly, or by the half hour, or 15 minutes, whatever. By the minutes, by the seconds, right? So somewhat of a think it's great with what Rebecca says about having that space, like literally shut it off, put it away and say, okay, I'm not going to check. Maybe I'll check these intervals in the day. And the rest, I will be in my creative, my creative realm. And otherwise, I think this can dictate us in many ways. So easy for me. I think we all do it, right? We have to keep kind of encouraging each other to keep that open time.
The problem, not to take over, but the problem also is that there's so much pressure, from younger administrators and managers that, you have to have this huge social media presence, a ginormous following, and you have to feed that, and it's like a self-feeding mechanism, and you have to be with it all the time. You can't separate from Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. But I think that you need to take that with lots of grains of salt. And like you said, carving out that space for yourself. I mean, that's what's really important in the long run. This might be the thing now, but I don't know. Personally, I think it's going to go away at some point, not too distant a future, at least I hope so. That's my technological prediction.
AI is coming, so.
That's coming, so all that other stuff. But anyway,
AI will perform, right?
That's going to be we'll get real issues.
But you have to be just really careful, not getting too sucked into the whole social media presence thing. Everyone tells you this is the thing that counts, but ultimately, if you don't have substance, that's going to come out. So substance is what counts.
Another question? Yes.
I think as pianists, we have to keep an enormous amount of repertoire in our fingers, and I feel like what are some strategies or ways to maintain or keep repertoire that we learned maybe like months or years ago, and constantly keep that in your fingers so that you can bring them to a concert stage or something that can be cool.
Well, first of all, nobody keeps their total repertory in their fingers. I mean, it's impossible, because we're not computers. So I don't think you should think of it that way. There are pieces that if you play a lot or you program a lot, they stay in your fingers. The stuff that you learned even at your age when you were really little, that sticks. And the older you get, the less sticky stuff there is. But still, you make a selection of pieces that you want to keep. And then some of the other pieces, you might return to them. You sort of get an idea of how long it takes for the imprint of a piece to fade. Because when you're teaching, you teach a lot of this repertoire in one way if you start to teach, and if you demonstrate. So that's a help to keep stuff in your fingers. And then, if you're playing, a piece, I haven't played the F minor ballade in a long time, and I was teaching it the other day and got to the coda, and I thought, I should revive this, because, I just can't play it without practicing anymore. And so that gives me, I love that piece, so yeah, I will play it, as soon as this is over again. And so, you get these cues from yourself, and it's a kind of creative process, but you can't say that I'm going to practice my current music Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm going to review everything I've learned. In fact, I could tell you a cute little story because I have a student who's extraordinarily gifted. And I was wondering, why he wasn't going, suddenly he's just kind of plateaued for a while. And I said, well, has anything changed in your life? He said, well, I've started a new program. I said, well, what is that? He said, well, I practice after this lesson. His lesson is on Saturdays. So on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I practice my old music. And then on Thursday and Friday, I just practice for my lesson. And I said, really? No wonder you're not prepared for your lesson. I think it's like, you can't really get Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto ready if you're only going to practice it 2 days a week, right? So we had this, whole thing, and he said, well, I don't know what to do. How am I going to do everything? I said, well, you're not. So, I think you have to be practical.
People are different, too. Some people can hold tremendous amount of repertoire in their fingers. I have one student who just, everything he ever learned, he can still play it just the way he played it before. But, you just do the best you can, and you play when you need to be playing. You have a recital coming up, you plan a program, and you work on those pieces. And it's a great thing to have pieces that you played a lot when you're your age, and you put them away for years. developed inside of you, and you play it hopefully completely differently, but you still have the basic, you know, it's stuck with you.
One of my former teachers, Ralph Fotopek, he was the first Van Cliburn winner in 1962. One of his goals was to have a huge amount of concertos under his fingers at all times. He kept a little manual, and he was known as the person that you call on Friday morning if an orchestra had a cancellation of guest solos, and he, I think, had 30 concertos kind of under his belt at all. And he just, for him, that was one of his goals. He loved to do it, you know what I mean? He was motivated by it, helped him in the long run, I'm sure. But it is amazing, that, you know, the capacity to be able to do that. But he stepped in on a number, very, very often, he was out on a number of occasions having to step in because he had it kind of ready to go.
You know, one of the things I wanted to do, and I forgot, I was going to overlook this, but I think it's really important. So recently, one of my teachers and one of their teachers, Monaco Pressler, do you know that name? He recently passed away. And I wanted to take a moment to honor his incredible life and legacy. The other person it's the 100th year of their birth is George Shevak, who was another main mentor of mine. He and Choi, who we went to Indiana and both studied with him there. I wanted to, when she comes, we'll talk a little bit about him. But I mean, this kind of reminded me because everybody has their own stories about what they got from Menachem. But one of the real riches I got from him was his, I used to go to school, as you know, morning practice. Building opened at 7:30. I was there then. And so was Menachem. He parked his car in his place, and sometimes I walked in first, sometimes he walked in first, but I loved watching him walk to his studio from the car, through the main door, whistling happy to his studio, and if he would see me, he would say, "What a beautiful day." He said, "I'm going to practice the whatever, Brahms hand variations." It was like, oh, this is the joy of my life. And every day, music was his sunshine, and he gave sunshine and life and joy and happiness to everybody the moment you walked into the studio. And that was a huge gift for me. I mean, I know I'm not alone in that gift, but I still have that enormous sunshine from him. It was, especially from his background, you know, it was amazing. So I don't know if you want to share something about your studies.
Yeah, it's kind of indescribable what he gave. Both my brother and my wife and I, my wife and I spent 7 years with him. All year. Winter, summer, fall, spring. 7 complete years with him. Weekly lessons and never hearing the same thing again. I mean, it was just unbelievable. He always used to say, you know, how can you play a Schubert trio or a Brahms trio or this Beethoven sonata so many times in your life? And he'd always say, you'd have to have calluses on your heart not to react to this music every time you hear it. I still remember that my wife and I were both working on the same piece at the same time, Les Joyeux, and we came out of our lessons, it happened to be on the same day, and we were comparing notes. I'd see stuff in her score, it was not in mine. She'd see stuff in my score, it was not in her score, and we was like, why didn't he tell us the same thing? And it's just the way he was. He was channeling all the music through the vessel. It was different. And each of us came in with our own response to the music, and he was working with us to make that. So it goes back to the idea of not having a carbon copy of everything. We actually lived that experience by working on the same piece at the same time with him. Wow, he could be mean. But always because the music meant it. It needed to have it. It deserved better than what I was giving it or having brought it to the studio. And that was his main goal. But his language, the vocabulary that he had to describe a feeling, to describe a sound, to describe a tableau for us to follow. So we talk
The
about
energy alone, every day was unique. Every time he sat down to play, I mean, he must have played, you know, whatever, the Schubert B-flat trio, or all these Beethoven, thousands of times. But every day in the same program, in a different town, it was fresh for him. He had that unique ability. I mean, it was just incredible.
I think about, you know, my brother was saying that he would sometimes get very short at lessons, and at first I'd never had a teacher ever who said anything unkind. I mean, it was always very positive. You know, say something nice first and then move along with the criticism. But he would stop you before you even started to play. I mean, there was a
Can
student.
you give an example of that? I never
Beethoven
ex-
Fourth
I
Concerto.
never experienced that.
It was Richard Ratner, who was Mr. Presser's assistant when we were students there. And he put his hands and he said, "No!" And he said, "I haven't played anything." He said, "It was going to be wrong." So it was just like you could just tell. But I thought the most miraculous thing that he could do was to play the piano that he had, which was a piano that Horowitz had played on.
Which
And
piano was that?
the
one on
D
right
in
or
the
one
corner,
on
next
left?
to the window. And he loved that piano. We played on it. But he would play on it. And it didn't sound like the same piano that we were playing. And he would be able to create these sorts of sounds. And so I think that's why it's important, you know, for us to demonstrate as teachers, because we give sound concepts to our students, and we help you find a sound world. And then, of course, you can't sort of do the same thing. You create your own sound world, but you kind of understand what he was going for. And, you know, he would color a major minor chord, and that just sounds, you know, kind of normal, but he would do it in such a way, with such specific voicing, balancing, attack, the speed of the attack. And, you know, he would just say, use the tip of the finger, you know, just to scratch, to make some sounds. And as my brother was saying, he had the most amazing vocabulary. I mean, English was what, his third language? And he was just so specific and very particular about sounds. But the idea of his getting mad during lessons was not that he was angry at us, in a way. He just, the music was so personal and so intense for him that sometimes it was hard for him to understand why you couldn't feel the same thing. Why don't you feel that D sharp? It's so important. And I think that his excitement and his sense of, like, always asking, what is it that you're doing? Why are you doing that? And then having us come to some recognition of, is that the direction I really want to go in, or whatever. And so he helped us sort of understand the emotional importance of why we play the music. And then you go about making that happen. But it has to come from the inside.
I mean, I'd like to just add to that, that, you know, like if you can have a lesson, I mean, I hope you all have enjoyed your lessons with all of us, you know, we're trying to sort of gift you our positive energy and insights, you know, so that, like, I mean, one of the reasons I would wait for Presser is that I immediately was full of inspiration, just the way he walked and sang his way to his studio. And then it was easy for me to self-inspire, but that's really what we're trying to, we're trying to give you that magic token. And it's different for everybody. So I hope you're, you know, picking up some of that juice and drinking it. Anybody else? Yes.
So when you are working on a certain piece for a long period of time, let's say, do you ever get tired of it? And if yes, how do you make it fresh?
Stop practicing it and come back to it tomorrow.
Or the next thing, or wait a week. Wait until you can hear it again.
Actually, listen to various people
Yes,
playing it on
exactly.
YouTube.
Exactly. You know, I spent a lot of COVID listening to recordings on YouTube, and you can go into such deep dives.
Mm-hmm.
It was just great fun, and I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I had thought about these resources, you know, earlier. And I think that's important. But if it's not feeling fresh, if it's not feeling like something you connect to at that moment, then there's no point in going on. Just put it away and then come back to it later on. But I do think that intervening time you can listen and be inspired by other people and go from there.
There are days, though, that you might not be artistically inspired, but just if you reach a day where you think, well, I'm tapped out on this, my well has run dry, find technical things to do. You know, make up games, make up things that make it interesting on another level. Something might then spark something artistically that somehow, by shaking up the other part of the process, inspires.
You know, I'm not sure that anybody practices 365 days a year, every year. I've never practiced every day. I mean, I don't even think I don't think I've ever practiced a week without taking one day off. I mean, I'm not like, I can't practice every day, do the same thing. I mean, it's not for me. I think most people are that way. That's fine. It's okay to skip a day or two or whatever. It really is. It's not, it might even, you know, it's like, I know you all have this experience when you go away and, you know, you're not teaching your own students and then you come back, they all sound much better. They managed to grow without you. That's a nice thing. Yes?
So, I'm wondering, like, as a pianist, like, it's very important to, like, ultimately we have to learn how to be our own teacher, right? We cannot rely on the teacher for the whole life. So I'm wondering, like, how to improve the ability to correct yourself. Like, for example, if you're on the stage, like, how do you, like, expressing and playing on the piano at the same time, listening to yourself, like, listening to your voice come out of the piano, and then try to, like, improve the ability to correct yourself, like objectivity for yourself, like how to improve this ability.
Well, you record yourself. It can be very painful, but you know, that's something that's very helpful. That's really the only way you can objectively listen to yourself. Because I mean, all of us have had this experience where you perform and you feel, oh, this went so great, and then you listen, wait, is this the same thing?
Or the opposite.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. The opposite is, oh, that was just absolutely awful, and you're depressed. Oh, wait a minute, that's good. You know, so you just, it happens. It happens where your perception of yourself, you can't trust it fully when you're engaged on stage with everything that you're doing and giving. So you have to listen to yourself a little later, give it a day or two, record yourself and take a listen, take some notes, and then go again. I think making a recording, I don't know if any of you have actually tried to make a professional recording with edits, in some ways that's an amazing experience for the work that your ears do. Nothing sharpens your ears more, I think. And that can be an amazing experience also, and what the pieces go through and when you come back to them, how they feel later. I think that's a great learning experience, recording yourself on any level, whether it's a professional recording that you're going to produce with an editor at some point in your lives, or whether it's recording, your studio class, then listening, going back, taking notes, and trying again.
I think it's an organic process too to become your own independent artist. I think the more stylistic, the variety of styles you start learning, the more orchestra concerts you go to, the more chamber music concerts you go to, the more lieder recitals you go to, your whole sort of paradigm grows. And I think you have more, to tap into. You become your own kind of artistic thinker. You're not relying on your piano teacher to tell you about a piece of music. Your paradigm has gotten much bigger at that point, I think.
I have a lot of students who have this H4 Zoom H4 Pro recording device, and I have one myself. And then a lot of those same students use their phone to record themselves. I recommend not to do that, because the phone has some kind of a thing that changes the volume, and it's just really bad to use that. If you have something better, but we're just really lucky to have something like this Zoom recorder. It's just incredible. I use that in my practicing all the time. It's in my studio, and I just, I play something and then go listen to it and play it again. And that's how you can teach yourself, for sure.
And also you're in a relationship with the piano for hopefully the rest of your lives. And that changes, you change, and you get to know yourself better. As time goes on, you'll find you know yourself, you know how you learn something, you know how your patterns of performance go, and you learn from that. And I think you teach yourself just based on the amount of experience that you have, and your comfort level with what you do, what you can do, the risks you can take. It will grow, and you have to just be able to trust yourself when you're your own teacher, and your instincts.
Yes.
Speaking of teaching, I know teaching is a very big part in your musical lives. How did this ministry, or this calling of teaching, come about for each one of you?
How did what? Can you repeat?
This ministry, this calling of teaching.
Oh, coming ministry. Yeah. That's a nice way to put it.
Well, that's a beautiful way of expressing it. I'll tell you how my older daughter, expressed it to me when I was teaching her when she was young. And she said to me, she said, "Daddy, I know why you wanted to be a teacher." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you just like telling people what to do." And so that's the negative side of that. For me, and I think it was the same for my brother, because we both studied with the same teachers all our lives. But it was Nalita True, our undergraduate teacher, who for us had what I thought was a perfect life. And I just wanted to emulate what she did. She was a phenomenal inspiration in musical terms, in life terms. I don't know, my whole teaching career is based on what did Nalita do? And how did she treat me? That's how I want to treat my students. How did she treat the music and show me the reverence she had for that? What did she find? So all of that maybe came from just a person. The music, of course, was there, but I needed somebody to tell me how I could put that all together as a career. That's for me what it was.
I found a long time ago that I got a huge satisfaction out of seeing that what I could say to somebody or show to somebody would make it sound so much better. So yeah, it's fun to do that.
It's sharing. For me it was sharing. And actually also getting paid. I mean, I needed to have some way of earning money. And what better way of earning money is to share what you love most in life. Because concerts are not steady. And so, in any case, just concerts is a completely different channel than one-on-one sharing. So I really like both channels. And that was always really, I mean, it's so lucky to be in a profession that you love and you get paid for it.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way, and it's about sharing, and it's sharing in two ways. Concerts, performances, very important for me personally, but teaching is the other half, which is hugely meaningful. And somebody asked about being your own teacher. Well, I learned so much from my students. I feel like just even hearing all of you this week, for me, has been amazingly enriching, and just kind of opened some pieces that I thought I've heard everything, and then I hear something different, and it delights me. It really gives me energy to go on with my day, and excitement and joy, and looking forward to the next day. So I also feel like when you have your students, you build a family. It's this feeling of mentorship, and you don't just give, they also give to you so much in return. So these are friends for life, the students that you have, hopefully,
In the olden days, for instance, like my uncle who studied with Vangerova, he went to live with Vangerova for the summer, and that was like a 3-month. So, this idea of you go to school and you have like 16 lessons a semester or whatever, 12, depending upon the school, and then you go there for an hour and you go away. That's relatively new. Teaching used to be a much more close mentorship where you really were, I mean, Anne Shine talked about this. I mean, it's the old world. Even I am younger than Anne by somebody. I mean, even growing up in California when I did, there were no schools or whatever. I mean, I would go to Alvin Serco's house and he would be gardening. I mean, I learned a ton about gardening from him, at least as much as piano, and he would say, do this and that. So 3 hours later, the lesson would start. And then we'd start the lesson, and his wife would say, Alvin, it's time for dinner. So, he would say, call home and tell your mother she can't pick you up now, or whatever. And so there was dinner. From her, I learned how to make all these wonderful recipes, including salad dressing using banana and all this stuff. You know, it was just like you went from the bed. That was still those years, and now it's much less, you're much less part of your teacher's family.
But you know, Anne Shine was my teacher for half my time at Peabody, and we had this we would have tea and cake and talk about things other than music, and we were so close. And I still wear a dress. I have a concerto dress that she gave me back then, that we went to the tailor together. I still wear it, and it's this blue, kind of navy blue gown. It means the world to me. I wear it for the really special concerti that I love. So this year I gave a student of mine who, she's long graduated. She got her DMA, her master's, and her undergrad with me, but I gave her this dress. I used to wear it, that I thought, I'm never going to wear this again. It's animal print, but she loved it. So I thought of this story, and it's sort in a way, I think I was so lucky to have Anne then in my life in that way, because that gave me a glimpse into that world that really today it's rare.
Right, so one of the things we're trying to do in this festival is bring back a little bit of that closeness and that informality, and that, there are things that, I'm sure education will change. I hope it won't get more impersonal than it is. It might swing back the other way. But, everybody, we're all of a different generation than you guys, and our experience is quite different, of course.
I have to say, I feel like I've taught my whole life, because at age 12, we had a neighbor, and the mother said, my son would like a lesson. Would you be willing to be his teacher for a while? I thought, well, I wasn't a big fan of babysitting. I think this is a great time. So I loved it, and by junior in high school, I had 20 students, and so, it was a good and bad thing, because I had to buy my own clothes, my parents, you're making it, but I always loved it, and it's always been a really big part of my life.
Okay, guys and dolls, we have something happening in 3 minutes, so we have to end right now, but I hope you get something out of this, and we'll see you in 3 minutes.